Welcome to Dr. Jeffrey Roth's Looking Good and Feeling Great podcast, live from Las Vegas, with his co-host, Darrell Craig Harris.
Well, here we go, another episode.
Absolutely right. And we're coming at you live from the office. So if you're seeing video of this, I have hat head from
You had surgery this morning.
The bouffant cap, yes. So they have the bouffant caps, which I kind of like. They're a little more airy, and then they have like the hardcore surgeon caps, which I think you probably look a little cooler in, but still, yeah, I can kind of go with the bouffant myself. So, and then the nurses, I don't know how they do it. The nurses in Philly, because they had like, the kind of big hair. Right. It was a big hair city. So like I think South Jersey, Philly, Dallas, Las Vegas, I think created the ozone with Aqua Net.
Back in the
80s. And I think, yeah, absolutely a cop to that. And so those gals, I don't know how they do it, but they have like 2 or 3 nets to kind of capture all the hair and stuff like that. So, and they also have the unique ability, and again, I don't know how they do this, the South Jersey girls and Philly girls to blow a bubble and then blow a bubble within a bubble.
It's a special talent.
It's, you got to give credit where credit is due.
Maybe there might be a college thing with that. I don't know.
I'm not sure. So that's a couple things, a couple takeaways from my 7 years in Philly.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Could be worse.
So today what we talked about covering is actually scarring. So obviously post-surgical scarring.
Sure.
Which is a big concern for most people, I would imagine.
Sure. So yeah, we get that all the time I'm coming to a plastic surgeon because I don't want to scar. Well, plastic surgeons, we still do make scars. I just blew everybody's fantasy. But we try our best to go ahead and minimize them or hide them in creases and lines that you have. And we like to think that we handle tissue really well. So do general surgeons, so do cardiothoracic surgeons, so do orthopedic surgeons, so do GYN surgeons. Now, there is much more of a consciousness of scarring throughout the surgical specialties as there ever has been. So one is to handle the tissue well and close things on the least amount of tension. There's an old surgical adage, you want to cut on tension. So if you ever see a surgeon working and he's going to make an incision, you'll notice that he goes ahead and puts tension across where he's cutting or she's cutting. And then you want to sew on no tension, right? Cut on tension, sew on no tension, right? So when you're sewing, you want to go ahead and take as much tension off of the wound as you can. And so oftentimes we will go ahead and close incisions in layers so as to get a really good construct. And then there's very little tension on the outermost portion of the wound, the epithelium. And so if you really have no tension on the wound, then yes, you can either use suture. You can use non-absorbable suture, stitches that have to get taken out in a few days, versus absorbable suture, which will go ahead and fall out on their own. And more folks are going to absorbable sutures. For example, and I kind of learned this in my hand rotation, it tried to get sutures out of a web space, and a web space is that area between the 2 fingers. On a 3-year-old, yeah, good luck. So, because the kid's screaming and mom's screaming and you're screaming, everybody's screaming, it's not fun. So we really started using a lot of absorbables there, and we've decided in other places that you're able to go ahead and do that as well. So that's worked out pretty well. Again, depends on how much tension there is across the wound. And especially, as you know, I take care of a lot of boxers, and the boxers like to think that the surgeons that take care of these things, especially plastic surgeons, we close it so that they are less likely to open up at a later time. And they like that because, especially in the boxing world, you're going to get hit again. And scarred tissue is about 75, depending on who you read, 75 to 80% as sturdy as non-scar tissue, right? So even when we go ahead and do our incisions and fix earlobes, and we've been doing a lot of that lately, we tell folks, hey, no re-piercing for 3 months. And 2, if you're going to re-pierce it, do it 3 millimeters away from where the scar is, where the incision line is, because that tissue is going to be more sturdy than the tissue that we just put together. Right. So we're trying to figure out ways to hide scars. We're trying to figure out ways to camouflage scars, and still be able to do things. And in the reconstructive world, you may have for a cancer that you're taking out or some lesion that you're taking out, you may go ahead and make yourself an incision, make yourself a hole. And then you're like, okay, well, how am I going to go ahead and close this? And that's where it's really, you get creative with the little VY flaps or the little rotational flaps or the other little flaps to move tissue around and really rob Peter to pay Paul. But at the same time say, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and rob Peter to pay Paul. I'm going to take some tissue from one area and put in the other area. But what kind of a line am I creating? What kind of a scar line am I creating? And if I put it next to the nasolabial fold, okay, people won't see it, as opposed to straight across your cheek where you can see it from a block away. Yeah. So we plastic surgeons are really always striving to kind of hide the scars that we have, even if they're normal scars. And the other thing with scars is typically it's a matter of collagen laying itself down and becoming a scar. Typically, I tell folks scars, whenever we do a scar, make an incision, and sew it up, we're into a year program. And what I mean by that is even if somebody came in, and again, trauma, whatever, from a knife fight, and says, hey, doc, can you revise the scar? The board answer, typically the pan answer is okay, but we're going to wait a year, right? Mm-hmm. Because the scars typically look their most red and most kind of goofy looking at about 4 months, and better again about 10 months. And so again, folks are like, well, wait a minute, you're a plastic surgeon. I'm going to get this sewn up on Friday. I'm going to go back to work Monday. It's going to be instant. And you're like, well, no, that'd be great. So, and again, getting back to the no tension thing, that's where also you can use tissue glues. And some folks like to use the tissue glue, but it does, the tissue glue won't work on a high tension area or wound because it'll just pull apart. What you have to have is really zero or very little tension across that wound, and then you can put the tissue glue on top of it. And some guys like sutures, some guys like tissue glue. It just kind of depends on where you train and what your experience is. But the common denominator on that is, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this epithelium together, the very top layer together. I want to put on the least amount of tension I can. And then people ask, well, what can I do to modulate the scars, right? So a couple general things is one is keep them out of the sun. UV light is bad for incisions and wounds. And also it makes them darker. And the reason why is because those the cells by the incision line are all kind of keyed up, and you hit them with some more UV light, and then they're more and more keyed up, and oftentimes they'll go ahead and give out melanocytes, which is, again, a protective measure from the sun, UV light. But yeah, you basically want to keep them out of the sun, and usually for a year. I mean, some gals will go ahead on their breast incision stuff. They'll actually wear Band-Aids, especially in the summer months if they want to go out, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And again, UV light, what do you use? You have physical layer, meaning you can't run around, naked in 3 weeks after surgery, and it's Las Vegas, so I have to say that to people sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, like you said, too, they kind of have that in their mind that, I went to a plastic surgeon, I'm not going to have to worry about this.
Right.
It's like, well, you want the best outcome for the patient.
Exactly. You want to put your ducks in a row. Right. So yeah, so basically, whether it's a physical barrier like a swimsuit or a shirt, a physical barrier like a Band-Aid, and then of course a physical barrier, if you want to call it that, is like a UV protection, sunblock, et cetera, et cetera. Shameless plug. We have great sunblock.
Just going to mention that.
So shameless plug. And but that's all important. And then the next thing is okay, what else can I do, doc? I like massage. I think massage is helpful. I think it realigns a lot of the collagen and kind of makes some nice scars and kind of keeps things soft. I also like the stuff that we have, which is a product called Biocornium, but many products are good. And basically it's a silicone base, and we plastic surgeons always like silicone next to wounds, and we've used that in the burn units for forever. And some little with the compression garments that we have, along with silicone, sheeting impregnated. Right. So some guys and gals like the silicone sheets, which are great, except you don't want it to bunch up. Whether it's Mederma, whether it's a Biocornium, which is a liquid silicone, which then goes ahead and gets kind of tacky, and then you can kind of put clothes over it. Because I like that because it sort of gets into all the interstices. The Biocornium has also some additional medicine, et cetera, et cetera. But those things are key. The main key actually is really nutrition. Stay out of the sun and don't smoke.
Yeah, I was going to say smoke, because we talk about actually the smoking element we talked about before, and that's a big thing about recovery, right? It's a
huge thing. There are many where I train, and basically most I'm just trying to think in broad statements, but I'll say the vast majority of folks that I know won't do facelifts on smokers. Some of them go so far as to a drug test in the morning of surgery. And what I mean by that is they have them pee in a cup and then they dip the stick. And if you're positive, your case is canceled. And they're smart.
Because it actually, it protects the patient, but it also protects the doctor.
Well, yeah, to do that. And I've had, and again, why is smoking evil and bad? Why is nicotine evil? Because it's a vasoconstrictor, right? So it basically constricts the blood vessels. You don't get the oxygen where it needs to go, and things tend to fall apart, especially those operations that are on tension, right? Facelifts, breast lifts, tummy tucks are all on tension by definition. And what did we say? We want to cut on tension, but sew on no tension. So tension is the enemy of good wound healing. So you want to put everything you can in place so that things don't fall apart, et cetera, et cetera. And so, so the main thing is that's why we don't like the nicotine. And even vaping counts and chew counts and nicotine patches count. So and again, I really hate smoking. So that's really super evil because you have a little more tar and all that kind of stuff.
And at this point, I think we all know that that's just not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. Yeah, if used correctly, it kills you. Okay, where do I sign up?
Exactly.
So, but it's ingrained in a lot of cultures. But
it's there.
Yeah. But having said that, so that's for me. That's important, and that will hopefully get us to good wound healing and things not fall apart and things with nice little white incisions that you have to go look for, and that's always a good thing.
What's kind of going along the same lines? What are some of the main questions that patients ask you about getting surgery? What are the biggest concerns you always come across?
Well, sure. So we always hear concerns about how dangerous is it, this and that, and they always have a war story for you. One of the other things that we talk about all the time, and a lot of concerns for a lot of folks, is again getting back to scarring, especially with big incisions like tummy tucks or scars on the breast or even faces, et cetera, et cetera. And again, especially in my population, and I love everybody, I take care of everybody, but especially my patients of color, my Black folks, my Hispanic folks, my Asian folks, and I took care of a lot of Asian, there's still a lot of Asian folks, especially with Pacquiao and all that. So they come in. And so for those folks, you have to really be a bit more cautious. You have to really handle the tissue well. We tend to keep the stereo strips on them longer to take tissue off. And because those folks tend to hypertrophic scar a little bit or keloid scar a little bit. So, and sometimes gals will come in and
you'll explain the difference between.
Sure. And then they'll say, oh, hey doc, when I put my earrings in and all of a sudden I got this big growth. So, all right. So what's a hypertrophic scar versus a keloid scar, right? Okay. So you make an incision in the skin, and the body will go through this process of inflammation and the maturation and all that good stuff. Okay. So sometimes it's a little bit too robust. And what you do is you lay down all this collagen, and there's supposed to be at some point where the skin says, okay, contact inhibition. Okay, I'm now contacting this cell with this contact with this cell.
We're going to bond.
And now, that's all I have to do. I'm done, right? And so then the cells shut themselves down. Sometimes that message doesn't get, for whatever reason, put across, and so you'll get what's called a hypertrophic scar. And this is usually in Caucasian folks. What it is it's define. You make your incision, and it's a bit of a speed bump and probably a little bit of redness in that area where you made your incision. Okay. Keloid type scars are those that go beyond the incision that you made, right? And so basically, again, some gals, we saw this in Philly a lot, is they would go ahead and earrings, and then sometimes, boom, they would have this big, thing as big as a mushroom, growing off of their earlobe, and
just from the trauma.
Just from that. We had a few guys that were shaving and basically kind of cut themselves shaving. And usually, fellas, we cut themselves shaving all the time. But these guys, wound up with keloids on the face, and we had to go ahead and resect them, move tissue around, et cetera,
it just kind of creates a mess, right?
Yeah. So basically, okay. So how do you, first, of course, prevention always. One is handle tissue well, to keep them out of the sun, but sometimes you're just genetically predisposed for these sorts of things. And so, okay, well, if you start to see a keloid, now what do? Is again, you have the lotions and potions, you have the compression garments. That can be helpful. Sometimes you re-excise it and put compression garments on it in silicone. Sometimes in really, really tough cases, cases that are impeding airways, cases that are impeding range of motion across joints. Sometimes you have to do skin grafting. Sometimes you have to do radiation. So, it's just a scar, but sometimes they can get really unwieldy and sometimes you can get a bit out of control. So again, you try to prevent, like anything else in medicine, you try to recognize and prevent it before it happens. If it does happen, you try to intervene and get the best result for your patient.
Yeah, in medicine, I mean, the thing is, they call it a practice for a reason, and you don't always have control, obviously, of outcomes. And so, I mean, your goal as a doctor is basically to create the best possible success route.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, you're in there with the patient and it keeps you up night. And again, I always read my about patients all the time. I read my charts right before, the night before I go to surgery, and in my head, again, I visualize, okay, so what are we doing tomorrow? I'm going to do this move and this move and this move and this move. So yeah, you think about that kind of stuff. And then, and then you get taught lessons, and a lesson is repeated until it is learned.
Right. And every patient's unique.
Every patient's unique. Yeah. You can have, 100 great cases, and then one makes a left turn and you're kicking yourself about it. And it keeps you up at night. And and so you learn how to process that, and then you learn where to ask questions. And I have zero ego as far as that goes. I'm happy to call or email guys and gals who have a particular expertise and just go, okay, I'm thinking X, Y, and Z. Am I thinking this right? And they may say, oh yeah, no, that's right. Or they may say, yeah, I used to do that, but I've tried 5 this way. Hey, try this one. Oh, okay. And that's why we used to have meetings. Finally, as we're coming out of COVID, we're starting to have in-person meetings again. And that's really, for me, where the fun part is to talk to other guys and gals at the meeting and kind of see what they're doing in their practices. And there's always the folks that are up on the lectern and they're giving great presentations, and that's terrific. But it's also good to
the give and take is
talk to those guys. Yeah. And the other thing, which is interesting, and they used to have this thing at one of our national meetings, and they used to call it complications and cocktails. And what it was, it was great, because what they did was they put a whole bunch of high top round boys. Somebody's going to tell me that
tables.
That's wrong, but
that's okay.
And all my F&B people are like, oh my God. And so they would put a laptop on top of that, and they would have these guys, the guys that are writing papers and chairman, all that stuff stationed next to a laptop. And you would bring back then it was a floppy disk, but then they went to the USBs, and you would go ahead and bring your photos and you would present their case. And they'd be like you and a couple, 3 other guys and, the professor there. And they'd say, okay, this happened to me, and this is why, and and this is what I did. Because in residency training, we would do what was called morbidity and mortality conference, which is anytime that you would have something gone wrong or a death, and sometimes that happens, especially on the trauma or general surgery services and such, you would present it in front of all the other residents and all of the other professors, and then they would kind of go through, okay, what happened with this case, et cetera, and then you, of course, read about it because you're getting grilled. And so they would grill you on this, and sometimes it, was punitive, and sometimes it was really educational, and most times it was both.
Right.
And, but you really did learn. You learn with the foot in the mouth, and you're like, or even if you're not the guy presenting, you're in the back going, oh my God, that's never going to happen. I'm really going to be on the watch for this. That's not going to happen. I hope to me. So with that is you always want to learn, and surgery will keep you humble. And I've learned that a long time ago, that the moment I get just a little arrogant, it bites me on the butt every single time. So
speaking about that, ego doctors, not only doctors, but ego, that definitely gets in the way, I would say. It seems in my layman opinion. What's your thoughts on that? Containing your ego, controlling that?
Sure. So the thing is you have to, and in my opinion, this is me, looking back, is I was never one of those kind of egotistical doc guys, which is good. I didn't, I had a real nice upbringing, and my mom was a nurse, my dad was a salesman, so and I had, jobs, working through, high school and college and all that kind of stuff.
Real world.
Yeah, real world stuff. I'm the guy that was pushing the mop around the ER, and so, okay. So for me, is I was really grateful, and I am grateful. I was blessed with the education and the opportunities I got. And so I just try to emulate the guys and gals that taught me. So that's that part. And part of that is not only can you cut and sew and can you diagnose and all that stuff, but also how some of them interacted with people. And some guys were just 4+ jerks. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be that guy. You know what I mean? And I learned over the years that you kind of don't have to be that guy. Now, some places, yes, there's some county hospitals that that basically, and I worked with, some of the professors that were there.
Because you worked emergency in, is it Philly, right?
Well, yeah. So
you've been in the thick of it.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a little, it was, the Knife and Gun Club in Philly in the 90s was busy, but really good training.
Right.
And so, and so, people would come and, well, I can't believe you work with him. He yells and screams all the time. I'm like, well, actually, if you listen to the guy, he's right. The point he makes is correct. And then the rest of it is just volume. And so now you turn out the volume, if you're his fellow or chief resident or whatever. And the problem is he has to use volume because in those particular hospitals,
it's crazy, right?
Nobody moves unless you yell and scream and carry on and stuff. And so I'm like, all right, well, thankfully I'm at a place in my career and where I go that you don't have to yell and scream. You just, you ask and stuff happens most of the time. And I've always found that if somebody's out to hurt your patient or do something deleterious, then it's okay to get fired up and say, hey, this is not going to happen. This is going to do this. Blah, blah, blah.
And sometimes it's life and death.
And sometimes, sometimes you can't mess around, right? So sometimes you're like, no, I need this now. I've screamed at the blood service countless times. I've, gone down there and got the blood and ran it physically back myself. I've done, all of it. And the blood services were, again, where I was, they were great, except they were short-staffed, okay? So, and it was a big trauma night. Stuff happens. They don't have anybody to run it to you, and your residents, stuff like that, are in 3 different rooms. Like, screw it, I'm going to go ahead and get it myself. And okay, that is completely acceptable. And that's fine. If somebody, hey, we're ordering lunch, for the docs, and somebody gives you like the wrong sandwich and people go bananas, I think then you're being a jerk. You know what I mean?
Right.
So professionally, you can go ahead and be a bit demanding if it's for your patient, but something, personal, then you're just being a jerk.
Right. And a lot of it too comes down to building a great team around you where you don't even have to necessarily always be in that situation.
Right.
And you do have a great team that's taken years to put together.
Yes, it's been a while. So we've had some humdingers. No, actually, we're very fortunate. Both in the operating room and out of the operating room, I'm surrounded by some really good folks, and we've learned, as you know, you've been around me long enough, is I've learned that you really try to surround yourself with good people, not people that are just technicians, but good people that have the same mission and are rowing the boat in the same direction as you and want to do because it's all about the patient. And I tell the young guys and gals, I said, if you're poised with a decision and you just between A and B, what's going to be best for the patient is usually the way it'll work out best. So and we've also learned a long time ago to hire slow and fire fast. And I used to be completely the opposite. And so I've learned over the time that make sure the pieces together the puzzle not only work well, but also work well together.
Yeah, and that's something like you said that I've learned that too myself. Like it's not always necessarily the most qualified that's going to be the best fit. Hiring and all that stuff, all that fun office stuff too, which is something you've had to deal with, I know.
Well, yeah, sure. Especially, again, and I am a private practice guy now, and of course we're just not trained for those sorts of things. So, when I very first came out, again, we could, crack chests open and we can, do burr holes in the head and we can do all these things, and then somebody hands you a profit and loss the first time. You're like, "What's this?" And like, really, Don?
Yeah, that's actually, well, you know, I mean, we touched on that before, but actually it's something we should do an episode on about the business of medicine in terms of running the office, and you're CEO of a small company.
Of a small business.
So yeah. Can you tell people how to find you, or find us, I should say?
Sure. So we're all over the place. Our cornerstone is, of course, the website, which can be found at jjrothmd.com. We also have a growing social media presence with from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram, of course, LinkedIn, TikTok, I think MySpace.
I know there's so many MySpace.
And then
no more MySpace,
but not Friendster. But yeah, old school. But yeah, no. So this is we're all over all of that, and then of course the podcast, which you obviously found and are listening to now, and this has been a lot of fun, and we've gotten more and more feedback. And so again, if you have anything that you want to hear, please go ahead, and we actually do check stuff like the emails and the comments and such, or contact us at the office, and we'll get that on for you, because we love questions and we love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, that's where we actually get most of our topics, is from people that are listening and sending in messages. And yeah, awesome. So thanks. Our new From the Office episodes we just started because we all have busy schedules. And we love our studio at the space, but sometimes it's a challenge to get over there.
Well, they're renovating it right now, so
which is true.
So we hope to go ahead and be back in there soon, as soon as they get done, as soon as the sawdust settles. Yes.
Awesome. Have everybody have an awesome day, and please check out and subscribe and like our episodes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. For further information, please visit the podcast website link for Dr. Jeffrey Roth. See you next time.